they're trying to plot out what will happen in Ukraine once there's a ceasefire and perhaps a deal that will bring the war to an end. And the Europeans are trying to map out really ways in which Ukraine can be reassured that they will have their security guaranteed in that circumstance. But of course, a lot of this is still very theoretical, because while Europeans are plotting the post-war scenario, no one has actually yet managed to strike a deal to bring the war to an end. The war is very much still going on. And as you note, European leaders are concerned increasingly about a Russian build-up near the city of Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine, which they fear could be the first signs of a major new offensive by Russia.
Now, Donald Trump says he will know after the call what to do. Where are we in knowing his thinking on what sort of action he might take against Russia?
Yes, it's very difficult because he's, as you know, set various deadlines over the last few months, and each of those deadlines has come and gone without any real US action to pressure Putin into calling a halt to the war. Most recently in Alaska, where Trump shifted his position, basically abandoned his demands for Putin to call a halt to the war and have a ceasefire in order to allow space for negotiations. The US position now is that they are going to try and come to an agreement that ends the war in full, and therefore a ceasefire is not required. Putin is carrying on fighting and has really unchanged objectives in terms of territory and attempting to subjugate Ukraine.
Okay, so the U.S. maybe has changed some of its positions, but Putin has been clear on his demands. How do you think that sets up for Ukraine to find some form of a way of agreeing a ceasefire if Putin seems, very, very stuck in his hard lines?
Yeah, it's very difficult for President Zelensky because on the one hand, of course, he wants to bring the war to an end. Everybody's tired, and Ukraine has spent 3.5 years defending itself against a much bigger enemy. But certainly there are very few people in Ukraine who don't believe that if there's a halt to the war, Putin won't come back a year or 2 years down the line and try and snatch more of Ukraine. So they're very concerned to have very clear, concrete security guarantees, who will do what, in what circumstances, and what circumstances would trigger, for example, a reaction that might bring troops on the ground, boots on the ground for aiding Ukraine, and what kind of weapons would be supplied in different circumstances. He's got a lot of questions about his security guarantees. So far, there are not very clear answers that gives him confidence that they could sign up to a deal that would have a long-term peace.
Yeah, indeed. Tony, I wanted to ask you about the comments, though, that we mentioned a little bit earlier to do with the conversation that was caught on that hot mic between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping about living longer, using transplants to be younger and achieving immortality.
Yes, I mean, it's a fairly ghoulish image, isn't it? The idea of just sort of endlessly transplanting new and younger organs into your body so you can carry on ruling. But Putin is quite seriously interested in this subject. I mean, he has in the past expressed interest in the implications of genetic medicine. And if you're an autocrat like he and Xi are, you're getting on in your years, but you have convinced yourself that the future of the country is most secure under your leadership, then you are going to be interested in the prospect of living to 150 because you will consider that's the best thing for your country and your people. And it's an open question whether countrymen in China and Russia think the same. But Putin certainly views it in that way, and he's interested in extending his lifespan. There's no question about that.